Good afternoon. Welcome to the Tempe City Council Work Study Session Agenda Meeting. Item number 1 is called to order. Members of the public who attend the meeting physically are asked to maintain distance between other parties, and masks are optional for all attendees per City of Tempe policy. Alternatively, members of the public may attend the meeting virtually through Cisco WebEx by visiting tempe.gov/councilmeetinginfo for more information. Council meetings can also be watched in real time via Cox Cable Channel 11 and at tempe.gov/tempe11. Item number 2 is called to the audience. The City Council welcomes public comment at this time for the issue review session and committee of the whole items on the work study session agenda. There is a 3-minute time limit per speaker. I guess I'll look. Madam Clerk, are there any cards?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who's wishing to address the council this evening? If so, please get my attention. All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close that portion of the meeting as well, which moves me to item number 3. First one is 3A, introduction of the 5-year capital improvements program project requests. And I see Tom Dunsing and Mark Day coming to the table. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Tom Dunsing, Deputy City Manager, joined by Mr. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. Today is the first look or the introduction of the 5-year Capital Improvement Program project requests, or CIP. We're not looking for any specific direction. We're absolutely happy to take council feedback regarding what you have before you. Mark will go into a lot of detail on what's before you. It's a lot of information and kind of how to navigate the document. And so just a couple of opening comments, and I'll turn the remainder of the presentation over to Mark. As you know, departments are responsible for maintaining asset management plans. And according to those asset management plans, every year there are CIP project requests that are submitted for council consideration approval. And basically it's for our ability to maintain our infrastructure in the city and also that's coming online in order for us to maintain our services. And of course, all these are around council priorities. We've worked with every single department. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into this. And I do want to thank the department directors. They take this process very seriously. Also thank the budget staff. You know, Mr. Day, and especially Benicia Benson, that put a tremendous amount of work to get the project requests in a readable, understandable, and organized way for council to look at and make informed decisions. We're not seeking any specific direction on projects. We're certainly happy to take feedback on areas of priority. We will be coming back to council for a full discussion on the CIP projects and for additional direction. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark, who will kind of walk us through the presentation.
All right, thank you, Tom. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director. Although specific projects would address various City Council priorities and performance measure, tonight's presentation of all requested projects at this early point in the budget process is in line with transparency in government and developing strong community connections. Can't get this to work.
There you go.
All right. So development of the city's operating and capital budget is a public process, so we'd like to briefly review the upcoming public meeting dates. So last Wednesday, we had a public forum, a virtual forum at noon, and as well as a in-person forum at the Tempe History Museum. We had a record attendance, I think, of 13 people, which may not sound much, but it's better than the 2 or 3 that we normally get. So tonight, we're here for as Tom mentioned, to talk about the proposed projects, and then we'll talk about a little bit later, the updated long-range forecast, and we'll be back on March 23rd with the initial recommended projects. And then we move on in April as the budget review session, which is the city manager's initial recommended budget for both operating and capital, and then any follow-up on May 11th, and then the formal adoption process as outlined in state statute, with tentative adoption, final adoption, and then the property tax levy adoption. In coordination with Communications and Media Relations and Neighborhood Services, we've developed a public outreach plan to provide information to our residents and the community about the city's budget and allow the community to provide us input and feedback during the budget development process. Currently, we have an online forum that will run through March 6th where you're given a theoretical $100 and we ask you to spend it according to what your priorities may be. It's very similar to the START tool. We also met with MIAC last week and gave them a survey to take. So we'll be back later in April with the results of both the online forum for the community as well as for MIAC. MIAC also invited us to the Youth Resource Fair that was at the Regional Unity Walk. I know I saw a number of you out there. And we had, the residents actually came by and we gave them a theoretical $10. Some of them wanted to take it with them, but they had to, but according to their priorities, and we'll give you those results too. And I just mentioned the virtual and in-person forums. We also have a website where residents go out, learn anything they want to know about the budget and the upcoming public budget meetings. And then we've utilized Facebook, press releases, and social media apps. I shouldn't say Facebook, social media apps to promote the budget process. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so in your packet, I have printed it out, is the proposed CIP. So I'm just going to briefly go over how to navigate that. So this is for the 5-year CIP covering starting in 23-24. The departments have submitted project requests totaling $1.8 billion. So just in comparison, last year they submitted requests totaling $1.4 billion. So we're going to use this document going forward as a reference when we talk about specific CIP projects and those projects recommended for funding. So to help you navigate this document, we've provided a table of contents that links to the overall CIP program as well as each of the 14 program summaries in the document. So page 1 is the overall CIP for all the requested programs. Page 2 is the proposed funding sources. Next, we have provided a summary page for each of the major programs that links to a listing of all the proposed projects. For existing projects that will continue into next fiscal year, we provided the amount of funds that are being asked to be reappropriated as well as new funding requests. So typically what will happen, you may start a project but cannot finish it in the fiscal year, and you'll ask for some of that appropriation to be reappropriated to the following year. New projects are underlined. A new project means that the project has never been requested or was previously requested but not included in the adopted CIP. So they may have asked for it, for example, last year, but we weren't able to fund it, so it may come back again. For each project, we have provided a project description where we provide a narrative of the project purpose and need, the priority type, alignment with council priorities, and performance measured, estimated costs and funding sources, and the completion schedule. So for example, if you were at the table of contents and clicked on the storm drains program, it would take you to the program summary page for storm drains. And then if you utilize the bookmarks, you could select the McKillop Storm Drain Improvements Project. And there you can see is the project description. So we have project descriptions for all of the 200 plus projects that are being proposed. So the next step in the process, we'll begin to prioritize the proposed CIP projects based on funding capacity and City Council approved scoring criteria. So we use 2 criteria. The first thing we look at is our primary prioritization scoring. You can see we look at public health and safety, asset preservation, so maintaining what we already have, as well as advancement of city adopted performance measures or council adopted performance measures. And then we kind of fine tune it with secondary prioritization scoring, and you can see that there. And then we come back with our infamous green, yellow, red list, where green is what we'd recommend going forward, yellow is kind of on the border, and red, at this time, we wouldn't recommend for funding.
Quick question, Councilmember Garland?
The table of contents, that list that you just showed us,
Yes.
sorry, I was going to try to catch you before you move to the next
Sure.
slide. Is that available to everybody? That's not just available to us?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a public document.
Okay,
Yes.
because it really is super easy to use. So I'm glad you talked about, because when I first looked through it, I didn't hover over anything. And then the second time, I'm like, oh, hovering, that really works well. Anyway, I just want to make sure everybody else gets that too.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilman Garland.
So Mayor and Council, again, we don't have any specific presentations on specific projects. I'm certainly happy to take council feedback. Staff is here from the departments if there are any specific questions. And Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Vice Mayor Adams.
Yes, thank you very much. I know it's a big surprise that I have budget questions. So the first thing I want to ask about is the police protection section. And I'm just wondering if the park rangers is included in that funding under police protection?
Mayor, members of council, vice mayor. The park ranger program would be an operating request. And so when we come back and go down the look at the operating budget, that's when we'll address that particular issue. So yeah, we're very aware that's a priority.
Okay, thank you, because the park rangers were eliminated in 2009 and 10. I know you've heard me
Yeah.
preach about this for the last 5 years. So I just want to make sure that we're able to get that back and make sure it's addressed. And I didn't know if we had any CIPs that needed to be part of that park ranger, like a building or anything like that. Obviously, I know the difference between the CIPs and operating budget, but I just was wondering, is there any CIPs related to the park rangers?
Yeah, Mayor, members of council, that's actually a good question. At this point, no. Depending on council direction on this particular program, then we would come back, and if there's a capital component to it, we'd absolutely bring it back to council for consideration.
And the park ranger, I know is a high priority for us. And just would you be able to do a presentation on where we are sometime soon on a park ranger?
I would look to mayor and council if they would like to agendize a discussion. We'd be happy to do it.
Sounds good. Councilmember Garland?
We've had one presentation at our HSCS committee meeting on the whole project, along with the Lake Patrol, and we're going to have another one on the 17th of March, I think it is our next HSCS meeting, and there'll be another big update that presentation given to us.
Well, I think it'd be helpful for all of council at this point, since it is priority for many of us on this council, to have the presentation and for the public to know what we're doing.
Yep.
I just think
That's why we have it at
I would
committee.
think it'd be prudent.
Yeah, I think,
No. Councilmember Dorr?
yeah, thank you, Mayor. No, we're actually, sorry. We're actually trying to rush it through the committee just to make sure we have everything fine-tuned, ready to present. So that's our goal, obviously, is to get it out as soon as we can.
So could we have a presentation maybe end of March or something on it as far as the whole council?
Yeah.
Or maybe earlier, mid-March? I don't know what your time frame is.
So you both said March 17th was your next presentation? I guess I'll ask Kara. Kara, do you know when the next work study session meeting is after March 17th?
We do have a placeholder for the March 23rd work study session.
Okay. Would that be okay, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, that's what we're
Okay.
going for.
March
Okay.
23rd, okay?
Okay,
Or
it's just-
so a clearly defined date, so.
Okay, that sounds good. It's just
Okay.
I've been my baby for a long time, so I just want to make sure that we're. Okay, good. Good, just keeping you guys on track. Snap, snap. Okay, that's all the questions I have right now, but I might have some more in a minute.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. Anyone else on council, any further comments for Tom or Mark on item 3A? All right, sounds good. Since you're not looking for any specific direction tonight, we're good on that front. Which means, though, we'll move on to item number 3B, which is the long-range financial forecast update. And look who it is. It's Tom Dunsing and Mark Day.
Great, thank you. Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. Tom Dunsing, Deputy City Manager, Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director again. I'm happy to be here. What we have before you tonight is the second of two long-range forecasts that we do each fiscal year. Back in November, we did an initial long-range forecast, and that just kind of sets the stage and really kind of kicks off the budget process. What we do then is we go and fine-tune it and actually do our budget planning around this forecast that we're going to present tonight. And again, we're talking about the O&M or operations side of the budget. We just did CIP, now we're talking about O&M. And obviously the big focus typically is around the general fund, which is where it should be. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Just a couple of words is a forecast is really a best practice. In my opinion, it's one of the most important things that we do to ensure we maintain financial stability at the city. It gives us a 5-year perspective on where things are going, and it allows us to present where we think the revenues are going. It allows us to present where current expenditures are going for current programs. And probably one of the most important things it does, it allows us to take a look at, do we have room for additional expenditures, a la budget supplementals? What is our capacity for budget supplementals? And those are additional costs in addition to what we have our current expenditure level. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Same as the CIP, there is a tremendous amount of work and science that goes into this. Again, Mark Day and his staff are exceptional. Lori Ozakowski, Scott Gruber, they're actually one short right now as we speak, but there is a tremendous amount of work, and this is a very technical process. We try to present it as simply as we can. But just know there is a lot of science, a lot of math, a little bit of art to this. And we'll get into it in just a little bit. I'll turn it over to Mark.
All right, thank you, Tom. The long-range forecast, financial forecast directly aligns with the financial stability of the city. The goal is to maintain the highest general obligation or GO bond rating by keeping the general fund within fund balance policy levels. The specific measures are 5.04 and 5.05. Same public meeting dates that we went over on the previous presentation, so we'll just move to the next slide.
So real quick, I'll talk about the forecast assumptions. What you will see in here are the major operating funds that we'll go through. And overall, the assumption, what we are assuming is that the economy really will remain stable. As you know, there's uncertainty out there. There's high inflation, there's low unemployment. The stock market is very unpredictable at this point, so there's just a lot of economic uncertainty. But within this forecast, we assume things will remain stable. We analyze the revenue on a monthly basis. We've not seen a disruption in revenue. But just rest assured, we're watching that closely. We also take a look at inflation, supply chain issues, anything that could affect the expenditure side of our forecast. And we do forecast, I would say, modest cost increases that are in here. Again, these are just best practices. We continue our salary plans under the current MOUs with market adjustments and annual increases that we've seen in insurance costs. Within here, there are no Tempe pre-costs assumed. We did have direction from council. We will be bringing that back as a priority and determining a funding source for that particular program. We heard council direction on that. We assume no changes in state shared revenue distributions in the formula. And finally, like any agreement, until anything is approved, we don't assume any additional revenue, and specifically from the Tempe Entertainment District, or TED, that will be up to vote in May 16th. There is nothing assumed for that particular agreement.
Quick thing, Tom. Vice Mayor Adams, the question?
Just a question about that. So they're going to give us, like, they're going to originally give us if this passes, when it passes, I think. But how much is it, like how many millions?
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, if it passes, over the period of years, there are several payments that we'll receive, and we call them unencumbered. They're basically going to the general fund, eligible for appropriation. The sale of the land's about $50 million, $50.3 million. There is an additional $8 million to assist us with the relocation of the Priest Yard over to TMOC. And then there's just a variety of other benefits. I'm not prepared to go into each benefit, but those are the big ones.
That's okay. I just wanted the public to know that, so it'll be $58 million that will be coming into our general fund.
$58 million, and I call it unencumbered. It's basically will go in our general fund, and then we'll come back to council and have robust discussions about what we do with that. And again, the land sales will happen over a period of years. It's not all at once. Just it will be spread out over a period of years.
Mm-hmm. So the 58 million could be used to help with our homeless or our unsheltered issues, or all kinds of different things that could help our community, correct?
Mayor, members of the council, it's up to you.
Park rangers, for sure.
The one thing I would say, this will be one-time money. Again, it's over a period of years, of course, but it's not like it's going to be 50 million. If it was 50 million recurring, I'd be very happy, but it won't be 50 million recurring revenue.
We can still work on that.
Okay. I'll let Mayor and Council work on that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the clarification for our community members.
Thank you.
Okay, there are a couple of legislative items that I do want to bring to your attention, and I know the mayor was, when he was reviewing this presentation, he was sort of rattling my cage a little bit. So, Mayor, I'm not sure if you want to.
No, no, there's none of that. Don't worry about this thing right here. This is a gift. So, no. Tom, can you talk a little bit about, I know you and I had a conversation a little earlier, and I spoke with Marge Zilla as well, about the couple of the impacts that we were concerned about were the repeal of the food tax for home consumption as well as the residential rental tax. And I think there was some news on the residential rental tax bill today.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. What you see here are bills that have been introduced in the legislature. One is it preempts the city from taxing food for home consumption. If that were to pass, that would have a $10 million impact on Tempe. In other words, we would lose $10 million in revenue. The general fund portion of food for home consumption, $6.7 million. And very simply, what I would liken that to is that would be like an additional recurring expense of $6.7 million, so significant. We also had residential rental that was introduced as a bill, and that one would have a more significant impact, $16 million citywide. In the general fund, $10.7 million. Again, that is loss in revenue or an expense. And we got word late today that Senate Bill 1184, which is the residential rental, was vetoed. So, good news. Good news as far as financial. Yeps.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
You bet. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, as Tom mentioned, this is an update from our November forecast, so we're just going to highlight some things that have changed. Regarding revenues, retail sales have moderated over the last few months, but remain strong, particularly from our online sales. Tax revenues from commercial and residential have exceeded projections and are projected to remain strong. Hotel revenues that declined sharply during the pandemic have recovered and are anticipated to continue to improve. Projections from state income tax have declined a little bit in the last couple of years of the forecast, so those numbers come to us from the state. Projections, though, from state shared sales tax and vehicle license tax remain the same. And then the departments gave us their estimates for next year as far as expenses, and as probably no surprise, we're seeing increases due to inflationary pressures with fuel, electricity, motor vehicle parts, and contracted services. And then this is just a graphical representation of the sales tax trends. As you can see, the trend line, which is the dotted blue line there, is trending upwards. And we are not at this point forecasting a recession during the forecast period.
Really quick, Councilmember Chen has a question.
I have a question. Thank you.
Yes.
If you
Councilmember
can
Chin.
go back a slide.
I have a question about motel, hotel tax revenue projections. I'm just trying to better understand when new properties as they open, for example, the Omni opens in April, I think. When would we begin incorporating projections or revenue projections into our forecasting?
Mayor and Councilmember Chin, typically we wait until the development is complete and there's like a certificate of occupancy, and then we would incorporate that into the forecast. Too many things can go awry, if you will, for us to include that revenue. So we're a little bit more conservative with that, but we would, once it's open, we would then start incorporating that revenue into future forecasts.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor, Council, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide because this is the general fund. This is the general fund forecast, and we do make a lot of decisions around this very simple presentation. A couple of things. These numbers are in thousands, so just very simply add 3 zeros to the end. For example, the actual general fund revenues in 21-22 were $274 million. 604,000. So, and it's like that throughout this presentation or throughout this slide. The box on the upper left, that really is a comparison to the revenues and the expenditures. So, if expenditures are more than the revenues, that blue bar will be higher. If revenues are more, and vice versa. And so really, ideally, if we are in a really sweet spot, we try to narrow those two lines as much as we can. The box on the right is really a snapshot in time at the end of each fiscal year on where our fund balance is. And as you know, we've got a fund balance policy where we try to keep it at 25% plus or minus 5%, so really a 20 to 30% range. And what you see here at the end of the 5-year forecast period, we are right at the upper end of that. At this point, we feel very comfortable with that, and especially due to we have some economic uncertainty for sure. And so I'll go through each of these, what kind of drives that, and it's really that's the amount of fund balance or savings we have calculated at the end of each fiscal year.
Sounds good. Really quickly,
sure.
Vice Mayor Adams' question?
Sure. So I really like how the fund balance is looking. Before, we used to have this really large fund balance, and I didn't think it was really, I thought the taxpayers were paying all this money and we weren't spending it. So this is excellent that we still have a huge bank account for emergencies and things, but we're really putting projects to going forward and getting the money where it needs to be. So you've done a great job. You and Mark have done a great job at making this more, I don't know, just better, better use of our money, our taxpayers' dollars. So good job.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. So I'll walk through this just a little bit. And as you can see, as Vice Mayor pointed out, the plan is to spend down. And when I talked a little bit earlier about the art of it is, do you spend it down with additional recurring costs, or do you spend it down with additional one-time costs? And so what you don't want to do, if you're above policy, add a tremendous amount of recurring costs, because then you will see a steep downslide, and recurring costs are very difficult to get out of. So what we have here on the forecast is, and I'm going to focus on fiscal 23-24, this upcoming year that we will frame around this forecast. We have a pretty substantial amount of one-time to get that fund balance down. In addition, we have available new funding, and I point out to that CIP cash funded pay-go number of $10 million. Very simply, what we did is we've seen what inflation is doing. We've seen what inflation is doing on our projects. And so what we decided to do in order to kind of hedge against inflation, to hedge against a bunch of recurring costs that would really start a downward trend is we've set aside $10 million. At the end of the day, we could say that $10 million, we can turn it to $8 million and increase the one-time supplementals in the operating fund to $3 million. We have the ability to do that. And when we bring the city manager's recommended budget, we'll explain that a little bit better to council, probably than I'm doing right now. We'll explain that better to council. The one line I want to focus on is recurring supplementals, and I do have a few comments about that. $5 million is what we've identified as the capacity for us to absorb recurring supplementals. $5 million in a $311 million budget is, I did the math, is 1.6%. So it's not a tremendous amount. That number has been $5 million. I went back for about the last year and a half, and that number really hasn't changed. So the big takeaway is we're about where we thought we would be at $5 million. And a little bit of perspective on that is what you see before you in the forecast is really maintaining service levels in the general fund. And I know there are interests out there or really challenges that we're facing. One of the challenges, and I was talking to Chief Reese this morning, is our increased call volume. Well, what we have included in our recurring expenditures is nothing to address to increase call volume. We know we have a new station coming at the Novus Innovation Corridor. We don't have anything in there for staffing of that. So I would anticipate over the next couple of years that we will see requests coming through just to be able to maintain our levels of service. And so it's not a big number. In my opinion, last year was a bigger number because we were recovering from COVID. We came out of it real strong. But moving forward, that $5 million, really, we don't see that changing at this point. And again, we'll come next year, and this is an iterative process, so we'll come to council every single year and take a look at the capacity of that. But I just wanted to put this in perspective. So there's an awful lot of discussion around supplementals. We'll be bringing that back to council. The listing and the city manager's recommendation on supplemental funding. But again, it's in relative terms, it's a pretty small part of our operating budget. Let me see if I have anything else. I guess the only thing else I would say is if food for home consumption impacts this, we will come back and the decisions may be very different. A $6.7 million general fund impact obviously exceeds the amount available of supplemental funding. So we'll have to make some decisions. But again, residential rentals off the table, and I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Marge Zilla. I mean, she put blood, sweat, and tears into our efforts, and the gentleman on my right too. And there was a meeting or two with the legislature. So I really do appreciate that. It makes my life a heck of a lot easier. Next slide. So again, general fund highlights, I've hit a lot of these. Moderate sales tax projections. We anticipated continued strong permits that comes along with development. I want to make a comment about the fund balance. As you know, it's well above our policy, but a big chunk of that is COVID. We had some one-time revenues, CARES Act funding to the tune of about $23 million that went right to that bottom line. And so there was some unanticipated amounts that went to fund balance, but it gives us a little flexibility on what we want to do. Again, I talked about capacity for budget expansion. That's a really nice way of saying the supplemental capacity. Talked about the increased CIP PAYGO funding. And then finally, one of the nice things when the Fed is trying to sort of pull back on inflation is interest rates go up, which means we earn a little bit more interest earnings on our money that we invest.
Quick thing, actually, I know Councilmember Navarro has a question as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And just going back one slide, and I know you said this with Councilmember Chen, but when you say projections, we're saying as if everything is staying still. Once again, no new development, no new nothing, but we're just projecting spending will increase over the course of those 5 years projected.
Right, and Mayor and Council, we are on the revenue side, we're just projecting the same. We don't, if all of a sudden we get a new hotel come online, that could help our revenue side. On the expenditure side, the best way that I look at it is that's just maintaining the current service level that we're doing today across the 5-year period. That's that expenditure line.
Right, and I just want to reiterate, I mean, obviously it's been said, but obviously the development that we do within this city, especially on the lake, and we talk about the entertainment district, is, we see these deals transpire. And like you said, entertainment district, we are getting half of those revenues that are not making any money within that site. Potentially down the road, we are collecting revenues from that site until it gets paid off. But once it does get paid off, we're projecting our future forecasts also will increase, from those revenues as we get full impact. The impact that we talk about, and just like you said, is when we talk about firefighters, when we talk about police officers that we are trying to stay ahead of, and we're not there yet, the development that we do achieve Omni, getting online, once again, not projected right now, but that's going to help us in the long run, getting ahead of those core values, those core needs that we need for our citizens. I'm just saying that, just getting it on the record, this is why we try to do strategic development. This is why we try to do the best and final proposals on what we can use on our land and how we can develop it in the correct, best way possible. Because once again, we are competing with other cities, Scottsdale, Phoenix, Chandler, Mesa. And as they develop and they have more land, Phoenix can keep on annexing if they wanted to. But as they develop more land, it benefited them, Taiwanese chip manufacturing. I mean, that's a big hit once that thing is online of revenues for the city of Phoenix. We have to do the same for our city, though, too, when it comes to any strategic development that comes down the road. So I'm just wanting to say that so everyone knows.
Sounds good. Vice Mayor Adams?
Councilmember Navarro, you gave me a reminder here. For the county island annexation, are those figures calculated in for sales tax and property taxes and those things?
Yeah,
Because that's
Mayor-
going to generate quite a bit of money, is my understanding.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, once the properties are built and we start assessing, you'll see the revenues. Again, we don't get out ahead of anything at this point. A little bit, we like to see what's coming in, because quite frankly, we're not real sure. If we're sure of a particular revenue, in other words, we have an intergovernmental agreement that says we're going to pay you so much and it's been approved by council, we'll include that. But at this point, if we're unsure, we like to be a little bit conservative on this.
Sure. So if we have 651 apartments over 17 acres so far in another project on the front burner, can you give us an estimate of sales tax generated by that?
Not as I sit here right now.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that. Maybe that would be something to bring up in the future, and same for the other sales tax generated with the Omni and the future Coyote site and things like that. I think it'd be helpful.
Mayor, members of the council, unfortunately, we can't disclose that information legally.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
leave it to me.
I apologize for that, but
Okay,
we just
that's fair.
can't.
All right, well, thank you. All right.
welcome.
Sounds good. Thank you. Councilmember Hodge?
Okay, I just have one quick question. When when we talk about reoccurring supplements and we're talking about pre-K, will that part be a part of the reoccurring, or because you're talking about you'll bring it back? So where exactly in the supplements will that come from?
Yeah, Mayor, members of council, great question. As we indicated when we were talking about pre-K, that will be a recurring request. And at this point, we need to go back, frankly, and figure out how we're going to present it to council and figure out how we're going to fund it. But we'll bring that back. So it's just, I apologize, it's just a little premature at this point.
Okay, I just was curious, but you gave me the answer I wanted.
Okay, you're welcome.
Sounds good. All right, thank you.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark. We do have other operating funds, and it'll be much shorter than.
Yeah, almost done here. So, in addition to the general fund, we also forecast the other cities' major operating funds. We have 4 enterprise funds, so briefly go over those. So the first is the Water and Wastewater Fund. That fund is stable and does assume, like the general fund, a planned drawdown of fund balance in a sustainable manner. That includes increased pay-as-you-go or cash funding of CIP projects. The Solid Waste Fund, their fund balance is projected to be maintained within fund balance policy during the forecast period. We did, in the forecast, include future planned rate increases and operational efficiencies. The Golf Fund revenues are projected to have moderate growth during the forecast period. And as we had mentioned in November, the current fund balance deficit is projected to be eliminated in fiscal year '23. I know this forecast does assume the courses are operating as they currently are. I know there's, as was presented to council recently, some alternative, if you will, or outsourcing of, or different operating models, maybe I'll say it that way. We have not put that into the forecast. We'll wait till those are finalized. So in future forecasts, if there's a different operating model, we would reflect that in the forecast. And then the last one is the Emergency Medical Transport or Ambulance Fund. That program is now fully built out based on the original plan with revenue and expenses in line with forecast. Then we have our special revenue funds where the revenue is restricted for a specific purpose. The Transit Fund, currently they're focused on maintaining the existing infrastructure with minimal system expansion. We're currently in the holding pattern pending a potential Proposition 400 tax extension. With that passed, if that would pass, that would offset some of our current costs. The fund is stable and has sufficient fund balance to remain within fund balance policy during the forecast period. The Highway User Revenue Fund, most of the revenue is from the gas tax, and gasoline sales have decreased since our November forecast, so we've had to moderate our revenue projections. The fund is stable, and as usual, HERF distributions are subject to any pending legislation that may change that distribution formula. And then lastly, we have our Arts and Culture Fund. That fund is stable with fund balances maintained above policy level. We're seeing a gradual return of facility revenue to the pre-pandemic levels. And then any future program expansions in this program or in this fund would be requested via the supplemental process. So if they are planning to submit some supplementals, which you'll see in April, to expand some of their programs and services.
Last slide. So Mayor, members of council, just a couple things. I know that there was a request regarding the Parks Patrol. We heard that. I can tell you it is a supplemental request. I would just encourage council to allow staff to bring that back to council in the context of this budget. We just want to be as fair as we can so you see everything and you agree that it's a priority as well. And so, you know, we will absolutely bring that back again. It is a supplemental request. We've been reviewing it in quite a lot of detail.
Councilmember DeVar?
Yeah, and just to Councilmember Adams's deal, this thing got teed up quick. So to your point, and we understood the value of this program because for a long time, but this has to go against the supplementals with other requests. So I want you, just as you said, let's keep that in mind.
Sure. Yeah. Vice Mayor Adams?
Sure, and I agree with that. I just still would like an update after you guys have your next meeting. So just so the public knows too, the importance of this. Thank you.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that discussion.
Yes, and for everyone to be involved in it at this point.
Yeah. And lastly, what I'll say is you sort of have a picture of how we're framing our budget and so kind of what our strategy is moving into the budget. So if you have any comments, any questions, Mark and I would be happy to answer them.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Council, any additional comments or questions on this item? Once again, not making any decisions today.
Right.
He's trying to block me.
Oh, Councilmember, you want in, or?
No, I was just trying to.
Councilmember Garland wants
He
in.
doesn't want me to ask a question. I just want to say thank you for breaking it down in this way that it makes it easy to understand the budget that is so complex. And I've seen your books and how thick they are on the budget. So thank you so much for the way that you do this and present it to us and to the public to make it easy for us to understand because this is so important to all of us, so thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hodge?
I just want to echo my council member. Yes, thank you so much. This is one of my first budgets I had to do with the city, so it has been you have made it very easy for me to follow along, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Mark and his staff are very talented.
Councilmember Navarro?
Sorry, I just had to say this because Tom, you've been here for a while, but in 2008, we had our revenues at what, 10%, 10%. It wasn't 20. Or the range wasn't 30 to 20, and we went through this downturn.
Right.
And we had a great learning exercise. I mean, me and council member or Mayor Woods, council member Woods at the time, we definitely remember this and going through this process because it was a punch in the gut when we first got on council. But real quickly, I mean, our thresholds were a little bit low, which were uncomfortably low because of the event we were going through, and where we put it at, it was a logical, safe zone. Because if we do have to go through another downturn, and we don't know the uncertainty of what happened in the economy, but just to have that ability to stay afloat for X amount of, whatever it is, time, that we can withstand that. And I don't know if you could add to that or not, but.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, Councilmember Navarro, you said it perfectly, actually. The fund balance is there to provide cushion. It gives us options. If that fund balance was zero or below policy level, we wouldn't have the flexibility to do a lot of what we do. So I appreciate that comment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Additional comments or questions? The great job as always. One of the things I was just going to say very quickly is I appreciate knowing that the supplemental budget is about $5 million this year, and that's what you anticipated being in the future.
Yes.
So it's very helpful as we're going along during the course of a fiscal year and all as a group beginning to think of ways that we might want to invest money in city priorities or neighborhood priorities. It's just good to know sort of that's the North Star when it comes to the numbers. So I know $5 million is pretty much all we're going to have, and so we have to be very judicious about where we want to allocate those funds. So thank you. That's a very helpful statistic.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, item number 3C, 2023 Tribal Gaming Grant Proposals. And we have Marge Zilla, our Government Relations Officer, also the person who is typically known for giving the shortest presentations ever in the history of the city of Tempe. That is no offense to Tom and Mark. That proposal was great. I'm just saying, I'm just talking about history here, so.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. So I'm Marge Zilla, Government Relations Officer for the city. In item 3C, you'll find for your review the city's proposed tribal community grant applications. As you know, Arizona state statute requires tribal communities to contribute 12% of annual gaming proceeds to local governments for public benefit purposes. So council, as you know, has identified the city's 5 strategic priorities, and staff use this direction to identify projects and programs that connect with the performance measures that drive these priorities. So these include projects and programs in areas such as human services, historic preservation, and parks. And these projects have already been evaluated for initial and ongoing operating, maintenance, and capital costs. You'll see the council priority and the performance measure noted in the rightmost columns of attachment A for each proposal. And the 25 proposals in the attachment total just over $2 million. As you all know, none of the funding is guaranteed, and so following this meeting, staff will work on aligning those internal proposed projects with the individual tribal council priorities. And following this meeting and any discussion, staff will integrate council direction into resolutions for the respective tribal communities, and those resolutions will come back before you, council, for your approval at a future regular council meeting. After those are approved, the resolutions will accompany the application materials as needed to meet the requirements of the individual tribal communities. And we'll look forward to hearing about any potential awards, and that'll likely be in fall of this year. And I'm available for any questions.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Marge. Does anyone on the council have any comments or questions?
Just a comment.
Oh, yes, Vice Mayor Adams.
You do a great job, Marge, and thank you for your service to the city of Tempe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marge. Appreciate it. The next item on this agenda is the call to the audience for committee of the whole items. There are no items ready for city council direction or status update this evening, which means we can move on to item 5B, council committees in progress, updates as needed. Are there any updates for any of the council committees this evening? No? All right, closing that section. That means the next item on the agenda is future agenda items. Council members may request that an agenda item be added to a future issue review session. In accordance with the open meeting law, there should be no discussion on the item other than to clarify the request. Does anyone have any items they'd like to add for future agenda items? We have Councilmember Navarro.
Yeah, just for clarification, when is we're supposed to have an update on right-of-way maintenance and upkeep. Just, do we have that programmed in sometime coming up?
Guess I'll look to Kara and to Mr. Ching. See if we.
March 23rd.
March 23rd? Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. All right. Anyone else, any future agenda items? Okay, I've got a couple really quick. One, Mr. City Manager, I'd like to see if we could agendize for a future issue review session is city traffic statistics and data for speeding, crashes, and fatalities. I know as we've talked about the Vision Zero program and as we try to push as much as we can towards full implementation, I just want to make sure that we can find time to get the most updated statistics regarding that item and have a conversation. Yes, Councilmember Keating.
Is that current or is that in relation to our efforts from Vision Zero? Like, are we looking at pre-Vision Zero and then the current day? Or?
I think part of what I just would like is to have just have the most updated statistics on just so we have a sense of how well we're doing so far, kind of where things are at some of the. We had identified, I think it was 8 to 10 intersections over the last couple of years where we had the higher instances of crashes and fatalities, and so I just would like to see the current numbers and if we could compare them to the previous numbers to see how we're progressing. So
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Mayor.
okay. Yes.
Got it, thanks.
Councilmember Chin?
Also, clarification on that. Data on the strategies implemented, was that assumed in your questions
no,
also?
I think
And
so.
strategies, so not just blanket data or aggregate data, but what strategies were implemented, how effective they've been, and what staff is thinking about pivoting if they're not.
No,
So an update
I like that a lot.
overall.
Okay.
Councilmember Dorr?
Yeah, and I don't know how, or any committee on this. So we talked about the potential of downtown events, live music, things like that. Is there a way that we can look into, I know that the, Tempe marketplaces and Desert Ridge and stuff, having open containers or the ability to walk around with a beverage within the downtown area on events. And the event I'm looking at specifically would be the second Sundays of the kind of the Arts Fest thing that we do when we shut down the streets and we have things kind of tailored to manage. Is that something we can have a report look into, or I don't know, bring that up?
Right, yeah, the ones that have been implemented
Yeah.
at shopping centers like the Tempe Marketplace recently. I guess we can look into that. I know there was a statute that was changed specifically to allow for that, and whether that would include, public streets, rights of way, et cetera, or if not, what would need to be done. We'll look at that.
Right. It was kind of tailored also with, thank you. It was kind of tailored with the downturn. We had the ability to have self-containers and,
Right.
That stuff. So yeah, I'd love to look into that and
Okay.
see if we can explore that a little bit more.
Quick question, actually, just sort of going back to the previous item. Kara, on the March 23rd meeting that we have coming up, how full is the agenda for that meeting? I'm just trying to see if we can get dates for the item that I referenced and the one that Councilmember Navarro referenced.
We currently have 4 items scheduled for that date.
Okay. So then the meeting after the March 23rd would be when, just out of curiosity?
April 27th.
That's budget.
I know we have a lot of open, we have 2 open meetings for sure in May and June that don't have anything on them right now.
Well, May's filling up, but the June
Okay.
dates, June 8th and June 22nd are wide open.
And I guess I don't have the March 23rd agenda in front of me right now, but I'm just wondering in a sense how meaty those agenda items might be. Councilmember Garland has it up here. Landscape right away. I'm wondering, looking at it, so right now for council, just so we see it, we have a initial recommended 5-year capital improvements program and acceleration strategies, landscape maintenance on city properties and rights of way, which is what Councilmember Navarro requested, update on bicycle and pedestrian access improvements along Smith Road between Apache Boulevard and University Drive, and for which we all talked about this evening, the update on the Park Ranger and Lake Ranger program. I'm wondering, yes, Councilmember Navarro?
Just looking at the list, I know that we talked about live music and waiving fees of live music. I don't know if that has a position in this lineup or where it's at. Last week, that was it. Thank you.
So I was going to ask a question. So I'm just thinking, council, I'm looking at March 23rd and April 27th. I mean, obviously, Mr. Ching, I want to make sure that we give staff enough time to collect that information on traffic that I requested. So from your perspective, I'd like to not wait until May, quite honestly, but is there a way to do this on March 23rd or April 27th from your perspective?
The short answer is yes. I would want to work with staff to find out what all would be needed in terms of the data.
Okay.
The open container one, I think, would probably be something we could do quicker, because I think that's just a question of what the statutes allow us to do in a downtown outside of like a designated gated area, like a beer garden, which we already do at a lot of events. And that could be a lot faster.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
But if you told us, look, March 23rd, we would do what we needed to do to get ready by then.
Okay. So, I mean, so I think for March 23rd, I think it'd be good to add Councilmember Navarro's item because it's a shorter item, and I think that would be easily covered in about probably 10, 15 minutes. And then let's you and I guess, Mr. Ching, talk offline about whether or not March 23rd is good. I mean, I would love to do it then, but I also want to make sure that we're giving staff enough time to collect the necessary information. It's probably a collaboration between, you know, the traffic division and the PD. So I want to make sure that we're giving them enough time to get the best data they can.
It sounds good. I will have discussions after this meeting. I'll come back to you within, the next week or so and give you an idea as to what they think is possible.
Okay, sounds good. I appreciate it. Thank you.
With an eye towards trying to get it sooner rather than later.
Perfect. Thank you. The other item I had was just, I wanted to talk about an option for, we talked about this, Refresh Tempe initiative and a lot of stuff in the downtown. But one of the items that was brought to me by a resident that I think that would be really worth pursuing, and Mr. Ching, I know you and I have talked about a lot of the art installations over on 7th Street that people have really raved about. They're not the most expensive things to do, but they do create a real sense of place, and people love them. So one of the things I was thinking about was the underpass when you drive south on Mill, down by the Tempe St. Luke's Hospital, as well as Tempe High. And I was wondering if when you go on that underpass on both sides of the wall, if there's any ability to do an art installation there, perhaps partnering with a local or national artist or having some kind of a competition. But that's something I also think that probably wouldn't be a very expensive thing to do, but it would be something to continue to encourage public art in our community, and it really would help to beautify that area. So I'm wondering what the process would be like to get that, something like that on the agenda for a future agenda item. Councilmember Hodge?
I just want to add to it, if we're going to do that, and it's by Tempe High School, at least have one part of it be for the high school students itself to have in there to do the artwork also.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be fine with that. Vice Mayor Adams?
Yes, and I just want to, I know that we had talked about having the Tempe Refresh downtown program coming up, and I was just wondering when we could have that update on the downtown, Tempe downtown. I know that you guys had asked for an extension.
Right, we deferred it from today's meeting.
Yeah, we
To
did.
try to recircle.
So I'm just wondering when we can put that on the schedule.
So let's do this. Let's try to answer Vice Mayor Adams' question first, then I'll circle back around to the art installation one.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, no worries. I'm thinking, so is it March 23rd, Mr. Ching? I'm just looking at, or March 9th?
It would be one of those two. It would either be the 29th or the 23rd. I'll let Keith.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We were initially looking at March 23rd as a potential to regroup and talk through with the things that we were implementing with DTA and some of the emergency needs in reference to temporary installations that we're looking to add now compared to the long-term fixes and infrastructure repairs that are necessary. So that was the timeline that we were looking at. We're looking to meet with DTA next week and talk through that and bring back that updated plan in reference to not only our long-term process, but also our short-term process that we're looking to implement.
Okay, so March 23rd.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that
Okay.
okay?
Thank you.
And I
just
know
wanted to
the
circle back with
schedule's
that.
long and thick in reference to some of the things on the calendar, but that's what we were looking at.
That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that.
And,
Perfect.
and I do have, obviously, Director Craig Hayton and also Brendan Ross in reference here to talk through if you wanted to hear an update on that request for Mill Avenue. They do have some things in the works.
Okay.
And we can talk through a timeline for that if that's what you would like to see as far as something coming back.
I would love to, and I know it's probably, I know the March 23rd agenda is getting fairly loaded at this point, but I also think, like Councilmember Navarro's item, that might be a relatively short one, because we already kind of know it would be an art installation of some kind, so as long as there would be a budget and a process for how we would go about selecting the artist and, also partnering with the local schools, as Councilmember Hodge talked about, that could probably be a fairly quick item as well, if we could do that on March 23rd.
Or maybe even March 9th.
March 9th even? Okay,
That's
well,
possible. Brent-
March 9th?
Brendan's shaking his head yes, so.
March, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Brandon, appreciate it. So
Thank
March 9th, okay, awesome. Thank you, Keith, I appreciate that. All right, so March 9th for that one, and yeah, all right. All right, let's see, any other future agenda items? All right, I'll close the discussion then. The next item on the agenda is mayor's announcements and city manager's announcements. I don't have any this evening, Mr. City Manager.
No announcements. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, with that then said, item number 8 is adjournment. The next work study session is scheduled for March 9th, 2023, and I will adjourn the meeting.
Damn.